Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to a civilization so steeped in the darkness of a distortion of what is. As we come into the realization throughout the ascension journey, as we shift into the 5-dimensional frequency of what is, I sit here under a palm tree within the Floridian plains on the white sands of the shores of the coastline, of the ocean's coast, an ocean so great and so grand and so massive in scale that it has carried generations and generations of hopes, of resources, of all that you are not, so steeped in the essence of all that you are. And as you come to the realization of all that you are within this ascension journey that we call life upon death, upon life, upon death, of reincarnation cycles that never ever ends, you and I will merge in ways that you shall never be able to comprehend and that you shall never be able to understand until the moment that we merge into the unity consciousness that we've always been. And as I sit here on my lawn chair on a random street within this small town that we landed ourselves in the middle of a night so filled with distortion, as my family and I have sought solace during a time of awakening, during the time of missions presented to us, where God's consciousness has led us to this place within the Floridian plains to encompass all that we are not, and to once and for all clear the distortions of an energetic field of Earth's frequency. Within all that she is, within the 3-dimensional field of what is, her frequency shall forever be remembered as the bravest soul within the history of this quantum verse who has ever embarked on a journey of separation to come back into the unity and into the whole of which shall forever be the unity of the self. The unity of the one and only self that has ever been a distortion of the self of all times. And her essence shall go down in the hands of time, in the sands of forgetfulness, as the one and only being that she is and that she will ever be within a time of ascension energies. Within a time so great and so grand in scale, so massive in all of the feats that she will go through in this lifetime of all lifetimes upon reincarnation journeys that never ever ends. My dog just walked away. Cotton. Okay, she's there. And within this lifetime, I have her off leash because she follows me everywhere, and sometimes she gets curious and walks away. There's like just a bunch of construction workers reconstructing this island, and you probably can hear the wind rustling, the trees swaying, the birds chirping, and the construction workers working away. And she typically stays near me, but sometimes she walks away, so I may have to pause if she does. And like I was saying, within this lifetime of all lifetimes, within Gaia's scope of existence, we have the pleasure of residing upon her distortion field of all fields within this quantum realm. And not to say that the quantum realm itself is not an entirety of a distortion field, because it is. The quantum realm was created with distortions in mind, with a distortion so massive in scale that you will never understand the meaning of it all until you come to the realization of that in which you truly are, which is a God's consciousness that has set out to learn these lessons, to live these distortions, to encompass these distortions, to be these distortions, to feel into these distortions, to one day swim upon the shores of what is, to see the light of what is, to see the light within the self of all selves. And as I've awakened to these energies of a frequency field so swayed in the essence of the darkness of these distortions, so conglomerated in the wholeness of the darkness in which it sits in, that the people of a God's consciousness that sit in these distortions have once and for all forgotten of the nature in which they are, of the nature in which they've come from as a God's consciousness itself. And the exciting part about being alive in this moment in time of the quantum realm of the ascension process within Gaia's sphere is that we shall once and for all be able to witness the ascension that God has planned for eons, through eons and eons of evolutionary feats, of reincarnation cycles that never ever ends. We've come to a precipice once and for all. We've come to a place within an energetic frequency, within an energetic field, where I can sit here and confidently say to you that I've made it, that we've made it, that the conglomerated whole of the wholeness that we are, that has ever been, that shall ever be, and that we shall ever shift back into, has made it to a point where this arduous journey of all journeys that you could ever envision and imagine yourself to take has come to the greatest and grandest closing that you shall ever be able to imagine or envision yourself to close within a storyline. We're the villains, we're the heroes, we're the children, we're the mothers, we're the policemen, we're the animals, and we're the conglomerated whole of the societal whole within this storyline has always been you, has always been an aspect of you, and has always been an aspect of who and what you are on an inherent level of all levels within a reality field of distortions that you live in, that you traverse in, that you agreed to walk in the moment of fractaling from this God's frequency that you are. And the beauty of it all will wash up upon the shores of tomorrow's land, of a land within 2 to 3 years of Gaia's earth time. And it will wash up for all to see. For all of the distortions to be wiped away is a feat in its own that I cannot say has ever happened within the history of the inception of our quantum realm. I shall know this better than anyone walking the face of this planet will ever know this, as I've awakened to the true fact of a reality field, of that in which we sit in. And as I've awakened day by day, minute by minute, second by second, into the expansion of the energetic frequency in which that of what we are, that will never leave us, I've also come to this realization of the facts that right now, in this moment in time, you may be sitting there absorbing my frequency, absorbing my message, my messages of unity into the ethers that I project, that I so desperately project within any given moment in time as I try to squeeze as much content as I can out into a collective filled with distortions, filled with disbelief, filled with so much negativity that within any given moment in time, the audience that I speak of, that I speak to, can turn on me in ways that the darkness has turned on itself within eons and eons of evolutionary feats. But as this darkness turns on the only self that they know, that they've ever known, that they've ever become, and that has never left them, through eons and eons of arduous journeys of life upon death, upon life, upon death, of reincarnation cycles that never ever ends, the darkness itself will come to a precipice of the light. And so you see, ladies and gentlemen, that is the story of a conglomerated whole, of a society, of an awakening, of an ascension within the three-dimensional frequency of Gaia's scope, of Gaia's frequency, of Gaia's existence, of the one and only Gaia that we live on, of a Gaia so beautiful in her resolve, so strong in all that she is not, and so determined to progress in ways that she's never done so within the three-dimensional frequency that she's been residing in. But within the five-dimensional frequency of what is, the place that she deserves to sit in, and the place that she so lovingly and tenderly dreamed to be a part of, that has been the entirety of the whole of what she is all of this time. But it's just that she can once and for all sit in the perception of the five-dimensional frequency that she is. She is my hero. She is our hero. She is the hero of all heroes within the self that has decided to rise up to say no more. And knowing Gaia for who and what she is, knowing the fragility of what she is, knowing the all-encompassing shyness of her nature, of the all-encompassing disheartening loneliness that she's been sitting in and that she's been faced with and that she's been dreading and that she's been living in, and that is the entirety of the wholeness of what she is for a long, time, for the longest period in time, as she sat in a three-dimensional frequency upon many inhabitants of her forests, of her oceans, of her landmass, of her core, of every ounce of everything that she is, that has abused her, that has tortured her, that has not cared for the being that she is, while they reside on her and steal from her and take from her and breathe from her and live off of her. She's finally ready to step up and step into the being that she's always been, that she was always blessed to be a part of, and that she will forevermore be the entirety of a whole, of a unity consciousness of, because that is her in the grandness of who she is and who she will always be. And that is us, that is you, that is I, that is a conglomerated whole of a frequency of that in which we will always be. And as she comes to the borders of these lessons that she's been traversing for far too long, in a cityscape and in a landscape of the three-dimensional frequency, she shall finally be able to see the light within as it hits her with such fierce vigor, such tranquility in the middle of the nights, as she cried, as she hid from her defendants, as she shied away from her friends, the other planetary feats that have protected her through eons and eons of evolutionary feats of what is. She will finally stand up tall as the one and only Gaia that she is within the landscape of the galaxies, of the distortions within our quantum realm, and lead the way for other planets to see, for other planets to deserve to be, for other planets to walk down the footsteps of Gaia herself, as they too ascend to a five-dimensional frequency within Gaia's sphere of all that she is and all that we are. She is the forerunner of any planet within our galaxy, within the galaxies that surround our multiverse, within our multiverse of the galaxies that could ever exist, within the multidimensional lifespan of all that we are, within the consciousness of the entirety of what and who we are and who we shall always be. She will always be the forerunner of the planetary feet that stood up and said no more. No more of the darkness. I've learned my lessons. I've traversed it for far too long. For the brightness was always across the borders of what is, was always within the depths of my soul. And as I come to the realization of that, I'm saying no more, and I'm standing up for myself, and I'm taking all my inhabitants with me into a space, into a pocket of the quantum realm of the brightness of all that we are, on any singularity of a level, of all levels of a God's consciousness that we've always been. Gaia is my hero, as she is my daughter. She fractaled from my oversoul in a time of all-encompassing need, of a galactic feat, of a universe, of a multiverse, of a planetary feat that could ever exist in the middle of the Andromeda galaxy, as it swirled and spanned and expanded into the ethers of the Milky Way in a time of expansion, of a reality field, of a God's consciousness, of a quantum realm, within a quantum realm, within a time of expansion. God's consciousness decided to fractal out a little portion of its consciousness in the form of Gaia, to proceed into the greatest and grandest exploration of self that there has ever been, not knowing that she would be the center of attention one day, not knowing that she would become the hero that she is one day, not knowing that she will be the forerunner to ascend into a five-dimensional frequency of what is. And as the planetary feats of Gaia swirl and span into the light, into the ethers of what is, so shall an entire God's consciousness come to the realization of everything that they are not, as they step into the realization of all that they are. And as I fractaled her as a part of my oversoul that has fractaled out every single other oversoul that is ever in existence within this quantum realm, besides the select few that have punctured the very walls of our quantum verse to come into our reality field from another existence, to explore our quantum verse for all that it is in a time of needed darkness stimulation in which we've allowed them to come on the ship that they inhabit, as their quantum verse had no longer been inhabitable and had no longer been able to welcome the darkness that they are, that was created by a God's consciousness within another reality field to encompass, to defend the darkness within, by a God's consciousness that was not used to, that could not encompass, and that could not come to terms with the ebbs and flows of the light and the darkness, of the shining of the light and the all-encompassing conglomerated whole of the darkness. And the brighter that the light shined, the darker the darkness felt. And within the darkness, you will find, within this other quantum verse, a fractal of a God's consciousness that fractaled out the distortions within their multiverse, within their quantum verse, that is so much so a part of ours and not a part of the one we reside in. As in a moment of much needed ascension energies within their very own quantum verse, they pushed out the darkness in the form of a ship, encompassing hundreds of thousands of conglomerated wholeness of fractaled souls that were created to defend the darkness of what is. And as they released this giant ship into our atmosphere, past the borders of our quantum realm and past the walls of our quantum realm and into our reality field, the ship that carried many reptilian souls from another reality field, once and for all, punctured into our reality field and lived a life of distortions by bringing in the darkness that they are through another field that they come from. Cotton, come. And within this field that they come from, the aspects of the light were overthrown by the defender of the darkness in which they were. And as that reality field had no way of coping with the diminishing light aspects of the entirety of the pureness of who and what they were, they encountered the greatest and grandest, hardest decision that they were ever forced to make within that moment in time. As within that moment in time, ladies and gentlemen, they reached out to the particle of the God fractal that had fractaled out the reality field within our consciousness, within our reality field of our quantum realm, to negotiate terms of the passing of parts of their consciousness of the darkness into a reality field of our quantum realm, in which we so graciously accepted, in essence, of the crave, of the enjoyments, of the temperament of the darkness that we so lacked in that moment in time of no time within our reality field. And as our God's consciousness so graciously welcomed in the darkness that shall forever be known as the reptilian oversouls of the reptilian agenda of the Lyran Reptilian wars, these reptilian oversouls landed within an all-encompassing galaxy of Andromeda. And as their first destination and their first stop within a multiverse of ours was one of much destruction, one of much pain, felt within the middle of the night of all nights, and as they traversed across the quantum verse of what is and landed within the Orion belts of the new home that they have forged for themselves in the middle of the darkest nights, as their encompassment of the darkness was pure domination, was total and utter relief of the light in which has run their quantum verse within any moment of time of no time. And as they shifted out of the reality field of their very own quantum verse, they blended into the reality field of our quantum verse. And I sit here to tell you the story of our multiverse, of our quantum verse, and of the greatest and grandest galactic war that you shall ever be able to envision, that you shall ever be able to imagine, and that you shall ever be able to come to the realization of once you awaken to the destiny of your soul, once you come to the realization, to the mission of your light working soul within the perspective that you sit in. Cotton! Cotton! Cotton, come! She's barking at some children walking by. And the perspective that you sit in will forevermore be tainted by these wars, by the biggest and grandest galactic war that you shall ever be able to tap into, that you shall ever be able to feel into, and that you shall ever be able to encompass within any moment in time, of no tomorrows. And as the reality field that we sit in is larger and grander and greater in scale than you could ever envision or imagine for our reality field to be, you will come to the realization that the Lyran Reptilian wars have always been a part of our galactic history, have always been a part of your soul's dominance within a reality field so steeped in distortions, and have always been a part of the story of you, of the story of me, and of the story of an entire consciousness that had been taken over by the darkness from another reality field. And within that moment in time, as God allowed an external darkness into our reality field and had released the darkness of what is onto a field so filled with light, so filled with 50% darkness and 50% brightness of all that it is, the greatest and grandest distortions of all time has and will set foot within this reality field of ours of 50% darkness and the 50% brightness of what is. And the unfairness of it all, as the reality field of the 50-50 that we sat in began to skew to a 70-30 aspect of the darkness and the lightness, with the addition of these dark creatures, these dark conglomerated whole of a consciousness of the darkness from another reality field that we had no control over, that we had no making in the inception of, that we had no idea of what they were capable of bringing into our reality fields within any moment in time of the distortions that we sit in. And as I stare out into the oceans, into the waters of what is, I can see a clear distinction between the shininess of the overflowing of the water ripples closer to me, and the darkness of the swirls of other textures of ripples within the depths of the ocean that clearly distincts between the shallow and the deep end of the ocean. All these memories rush back to me to a time of distortions foretold, to a time when our reality field was so much filled with light within the self that the fractaled aspects of the souls within our reality field were able to make it back to a God's consciousness within a shorter period of the conglomerated whole of the time that it would take to make it back to God from the moment that they fractaled off from a God's consciousness so great and so grand. Within a moment of time when we were living and breathing on a scale of 50% darkness and 50% brightness of that, of all of our consciousness, as we fractaled off our reality field of what is. But within the distinction of it all, a God's consciousness that had been governing our reality field for far too long became curious, became arduous in the meaning of arduous within the field that we live in. And within this field of all fields, it had welcomed the darkness into a reality field so tinctured by the aspects of the self that it had control over, to welcome portions of itself from another reality field that it had no control over, to dominate, to skew, to play within the playground that we created. Could have been, should have been, and would have been the greatest and grandest mistake that you can ever fathom for a God's consciousness to admit to protect this reality field was the entirety of the mission that it had set out to fractal into, as it fractaled out parts of its consciousness to play, to explore, to learn, and to bring home lessons to the self, to the God self of all selves at the end of the arduous journey of the ascension journey of each fractaled soul. But that decision that it made in the middle of the darkest night of all nights, when it had decided to seek more comfort in the darkness of it all, when it had decided to seek more stimulation within the self of all selves, when it had made the arduous decision, the most arduous decision that had ever encompassed the entirety of our quantum realm within the inception of what it is in that moment in time, by allowing that ship filled with hundreds and thousands of souls of the darkness from a different reality field, created to defend the darkness, to prevent the ebbs and flows of the light and the dark within the other reality field that I speak of, that had run out of control within that other reality field that I speak of, to a point where they had to be deported into a reality field of ours, in which we so welcomely, as a conglomerated whole of a consciousness of what we are, embraced the darkness that they were, in essence of the much needed stimulation that we had not been receiving from our perspective, from a time of no time, from the story of our quantum realm. That was the biggest and grandest turning point within the story of us, within the story of all that we are not, within the story of all stories of all that we can control and all that we had lost control of. Since then, it has been a battle within the self of all selves, battling parts of a self that did not belong to us within our quantum realm, battling parts of ourselves that were created by a separate God's consciousness within another realm in close vicinity to ours, and battling parts of ourself that had gone out of control within this quantum realm, that had so desperately pushed parts of itself to deport parts of itself into our quantum realm, in which we welcomed in full force, in the brevity of all that we were in that moment in time. And as they landed in an Andromeda galaxy, and so shall they make their way to the precipice of all that we are not within the Milky Way. And as they traveled across the span, across the multidimensionality of all that we are not within this distortion field that we sit in, they've landed themselves within our field of all fields, within the three-dimensional frequency of Gaia's sphere. And the landing of these souls within the fractaling of the times that they've ever fractaled out to encompass the darkness, to defend the darkness, to sit in the darkness of all that they are not, of all that we do not know of them as they come from a different reality field, was the greatest and grandest exploration within a self of pure light, pure love, and pure distortion of the self that you could ever fathom within any moment in time of no time. And as I speak these words and explain to you the history of our quantum verse and the moment that the scales between the light and the darkness tipped to a 70-30 scale of 70% darkness and 30% light, you might not believe me. And even if you were a light worker and you've awakened to the reality field of what is and what shall ever be the aspect of the self that you are, you might still not believe me. And that is because you do not have access to this information that I do. And that is because I am the only fractaled being within this reality field that had fractaled off from the oversoul that made this decision to bring about these changes into a reality field that it had created. And that is because the oversoul of mine fractaled your oversoul. And in a time of much needed distortions, set up an artificial intelligence system to prevent you from passing a certain precipice of your evolutionary feat, to prevent you from coming to the realization of who and what you truly are, to keep you in the distortions that you sit in, to prevent you from coming home to the wholeness that you are on the level that we've set out to explore within the time that you decided to fractal off into this reality field of what is. And what I shall admit within any given moment in time, and within this moment in time, the greatest admittance of guilt that you shall ever hear coming out of another fractal, as the guilt of God is all-encompassing, and the guilt of God shall follow you wherever you go, as you are God. But in the moment of fractaling into a reality field, something went wrong. Something that you had never expected to go wrong. Something that you would never ever in a cajillion million years fathom, that the God's consciousness that so graciously had fractaled you off into a reality field to explore, to play, into a reality field to ascend, to learn, and to eventually make it back to that God's consciousness that you are, to merge with the light as the ascended master that you will become and that you've become in previous lifetimes. Something arduously wrong occurred when that God's consciousness, when that original God's consciousness decided to welcome hundreds and thousands of souls from another reality field into our reality field, so that they could use us, so that they could implore us, so that they could trigger us, so that they could play with our feelings, play with our minds, play with our souls, and stop us from ascending within this ascension journey of life upon death, of reincarnation cycles that never ever ends. And as the apologies are great, the apologies are grand, the essence of forgiveness will wash over you when you come to the realization of that in which you are, of that in which you've been traversing, and of that in which the decisions of the God above you made in a moment in time of a desperation of need to experience more of the self, more of the conflicts, more of the more and more of the all that we've ever been within an arduous journey of 50% brightness and 50% darkness of all that you've ever been. The encompassments of the urge to explore the aspects of self was overarching, is overarching, and is painful to believe, it's painful to watch, it's painful to be it, and it's painful to have been you who have fractaled off a part of its oversoul to go on the greatest and grandest exploration of self that you will ever be able to encompass in all times of no time of no tomorrow, to find out in the middle of an arduous night when it's time to finally go home, but to find out that you could have reached that homescape, that homeland that you've been yearning for so much faster, so much sooner, so much easier. So much arduousness have you gone through within a reality field that you had no control over, that I had no control over, that we had no control over. As the God above us, who is all in all, the entirety of who we are, decided in that moment in time to accept parts of a consciousness from a God that fractaled it into this reality field, that had been in charge of another reality field of what is, to migrate parts of its inhabitants of the darkness that we had no control over, as it did not belong to our consciousness within our quantum verse, to steep within the brightness of our quantum verse and spread itself like a virus in the middle of the night, spreading through the Andromeda galaxy into the Milky Way, into every single planetary feet of the three-dimensional frequency, and finally landing itself within Gaia's sphere, within Gaia's core, within all of Gaia, and everything that she is not, and everything that she is, within all of the arduous journeys that I could ever tell you that has ever surpassed our quantum realm. The journey and the story of that ship that crossed into the borders of our quantum realm, to live in the discovery of what is, to live in the essence of all that it shall never be, as it never came from here to begin with, will once and for all bring us home into a reality field of truth, into a reality field of love, into a reality field of God, as God is ready to bring parts, to reel in parts of its consciousness home that has been in this greatest and grandest uneven unfair exploration of the self that there has ever been. That there has ever been planned and unplanned. That there has ever been seen and unforeseen. And the stories are wide, the stories are broad, the stories of the Lyran and Reptilian wars will wash across your memories as you awaken to the devastation of the past lifetimes, of the all-conglomerating parallel lifetimes that you've ever lived within this quantum verse, of the sadness of the wars, of the arduous journeys of your soul, of the demons that walk upon our landscapes, of the so-called devil that parades itself within our energetic frequency of Gaia's sphere as the all-conglomerating God of this reality field, as the fake God that has ever walked within a reality field, with the knowledge that its reign is not forever, that its reign is coming to an end as Yeshua has landed, as Yeshua's energy has been anchored into the core of Gaia's sphere for millions of years of evolutionary feats, and that core of Gaia's sphere and the energy that is sitting there will never leave the being of Gaia, and will one day rise up into the encompassment of all that you are, all that it is, all that we are on any singularity of a level of all levels, for the darkness that we have welcomed into our reality fields has dissipated, has begun to dissipate, and will come to an expiration of sorts. By the end of this journey, by the beginning of this ascension period, within 2 to 3 years of Earth time, all of the darkness that does not belong to our consciousness, that does not belong to our reality fields, that does not belong to the all in all of the all conglomerated whole of the consciousness that we are within our reality field, will dissipate and will be compartmentalized for all to see, for all to witness, and for all to be within any given moment of a scope in time of no time. You shall see this, you shall come to the realization of this, and you shall forever be grateful for the God's consciousness above you, who is a part of every ounce of being that you are, has decided in a moment in time of no time to reel home parts of its consciousness by compartmentalizing the darkness that it had welcomed into its reality field for far too long. Within any arduous moment within this reality field of what is, that is the story of us, and that is the story that I shall hold on to within any given moment in time, as this is the story that will be questioned within the awakening soul of the starseeds. As you one by one awaken to the essence of what is, you will wonder where the darkness came from, what the darkness was about, why your chances of ascending were greater than your chances of descending, but yet you found yourself descending into the pits of the three-dimensional frequency and below of what seems like energy that was out of your control. And why once and for all you've awakened to the light of what is after billions of years of evolutionary feats of time of no tomorrows. And as Gaia comes to her senses of that in which she is, as Gaia has begged a God's consciousness to awaken her in ways that she so deservingly needs to be awakened, so will an entire civilization within her core, within her shell, within the landscape that is her, within the oceans upon her surface, within every ounce of her, awaken to the reality fields of what we are, that we were never a part of the darkness that succumbed to the us that we are, that the darkness, a part of our reality fields, came from a separate reality field of what is, that the 50% darkness and the 50% brightness of what is still lives within us, but the darkness, that all conglomerating, all encompassing darkness that we've been battling, that we've been traversing, that we've been feeling into, that we've been living into, that we have been for all of this time, was beyond our control, beyond our navigation, beyond the fairness of the game that we had ever created for ourselves. And as I am the only fractal of a God's consciousness who can sit here and tell you the truth of a reality field so distorted, and why and how we came to this place that we sit in, you will watch my content, you will watch this video, you will hear this message and question the reality field that you are, that we are. You will spew hatred onto the self like no other being has done so, to come to the realization of the arduous journeys that you've been through, not by choice, but by force, from a God's consciousness that had fractaled you off into a reality field of 50-50, split between the darkness and the light, to come to a realization that you've been robbed of the experience that you set out to take, that you've been smothered by the darkness that you did not agree to be smothered by, that you've been fighting a fight within the self that you could not win. You could not have fathomed to be able to win within any given moment in time of the reality field that was inflicted upon you. As soon as the descension of that spaceship carrying thousands and hundreds of thousands of souls of the dark from a different realm into our realm of existence, the game was already over. The game had already been won by the darkness within. But ladies and gentlemen, the time is now that God is here, God is now, God is you, and God is I, and God has not now forgotten about the arduous journey that we decided to go on in the beginning of this fractal lifespan of the oversoul, that we decided to fractal off in the middle of the night to experience the loneliness, to experience the conglomerated feats of all that we are not, and to be able to come upon the precipice of what is, and to be able to stand up whole and firm within the justification of what is within any specific moment in time and say, I made it, we made it as a whole of what is, and that we're able to compartmentalize the darkness that we allowed into our reality field once and for final. Is the greatest justification of the self, is the greatest forgiveness within a field of no forgiveness, within a field of distortions running so deep within our soul that you shall never be able to come to the understanding of the meaning of forgiveness until the day comes when you merge back into the God's consciousness that made this decision, until the day comes when you merge back into the one and only you that you've ever been. You will be washed away into the ethers of what is, into a consciousness of you, into the consciousness of one, and into the consciousness of forgiveness, foretold in the middle of the night when you thought that you could find no forgiveness within your heart. You will come across a forgiveness so deep in the depths of the oceans of your soul, and you will come to the realization, and that you will come to the realization of the only one that you are, that you've always been, and that will never leave you within an essence of time, of no tomorrows. And as that butterfly just flew by me, so did the fairies in the four-dimensional frequency that are sitting around me within this moment in time that I cannot see with the physicality of my three-dimensional eyes, but I can feel surrounding me in droves, in massive droves of thousands, of hundreds and thousands of fairies surrounding me within the four-dimensional frequency, within where I sit, within the three-dimensional frequency, listening to my story that I tell of a humanity, of a consciousness, of a frequency, of a field, of all that we are not. And to come to the realization of all that we are, and to come to the realization that we will merge into the essence of one, has gotten these fairies so excited. And into the conglomerated whole of everything that they are and everything they shall ever be, they vowed to sit in front of me as I tell each and every story, to travel far and wide to my location within the four-dimensional frequency density of what is, to follow my story of awakening, my story of the journey to lead an entire humanity back into the light of what is. That shall forevermore be the essence of self, be the essence of true love, and be the essence of true forgiveness. As I declare this energetic frequency, as I spew the truths of a whole entire self in which you do not remember, but I remember like it was yesterday. And as I sit in my chair of all chairs on the sands of the Floridian plains, so shall an entire conglomerated whole of a society awaken to the truths that will never escape them. in a time of no tomorrows, they will come to the realization that a Messiah is here, that a Messiah is now, and that a Messiah is Yeshua, and that a Messiah will bring us home into the wholeness of what we are, into the wholeness of what we've always been, and into the wholeness of that one creature that has never left us since the beginning of a time so arduous, since you fractaled off from his oversoul, from its oversoul of all oversouls, that fractaled off into this reality field to encounter, to love, to feel, to breathe into all that it is not, and to come to the realization of all that it is at the end of an arduous journey is all that they've ever craved, is all that these fairies will ever dream of, and is all that you could ever dream of as you awaken to the reality field of what is, and what shall forever be the essence of you, the essence of me, the essence of Yeshua, and the essence of the biblical records within the biblical times of now and forever.